Reservation Commission to order. Have the roll call, please.
Emmy Scherer.
Here.
Paul Filicetti.
Here.
Steve Adler.
Here.
Kathy Bickenhauser. Absent. Julia McCarthy McClaverty. Absent. Jim McDonald.
Here.
Solomon Martin.
Here.
Jolene Brink.
Here.
Bruce Haroldson.
Here.
And you have quorum.
All right, thank you. Approval of the minutes from the November 1st and December 6th, 2018. Any corrections or additions? No? Is there a motion? Yeah. There's, you want to go through them?
Still need a motion?
Yeah, people still reading? Are you okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
I would move to accept the minutes. Do we need to do them individually, or can we adopt or approve them
Let's
both
go
at
ahead and
once?
do them individually in case there's
Okay.
any.
Then I'd move that we approve the minutes for November 1st, 2018.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Now
And
the
then,
December 6th.
Paul, would you like the honors?
Sorry.
Okay, and same motion to approve the minutes for December 6th, 2018.
A second? Second, Jolene? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, very good. Is there any public comment of items not on the agenda this evening? No? Okay, thank you. New business, a special presentation on tablet training.
Hey, so this is the third meeting I think we've had with these tablets, but it's probably, this is on, right? Yeah. It's probably important to know how to operate them, huh? So what is pulled up on the tablets is the public side of SIRE, which is our current meeting management program. I pulled it up here on the projector too, so feel free to either follow along on the tablet or on the screen. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Sean Kirkpatrick. If you don't know me, I'm the admin assistant for development services and assisting the board currently, or commission currently. Anyways, so if you're on this SIRE page, you'll see some of these items are blue. So for example, the item we just did, approval of minutes, if you either click on it, it is a touch screen on the tablet, so you can touch it or you can use the little trackpad on the keyboard. If you click on that, on the right-hand side, it'll pull up any associated documents. So it'll pull up both sets of minutes, and then you can go ahead and click on that, and it'll open up that document. And then if there's any legislative history associated with an item, so for example, if you want to scroll down to old business, item D, the 216 West Main Street garage doors, that's the ZAC building that was discussed last month. So if you click on history, it'll pull up any previous meetings that that item has been discussed at. So, let's say you either weren't here or you forgot what happened. You can click on that meeting date and it'll take you to the meeting, the previous meeting. And then you can click on the item. It'll actually automatically be there and you can open up those previous supporting documents. Or if the minutes are available, you can click on the minutes option up at the top and don't know why it's not showing. Technical error. Normally, you would be able to click on the minutes option and it would show you the minutes from that previous meeting. So you could, refresh. Or if it wasn't an HPC meeting, like let's say something had gone through like land use and planning and then came here, you could see what happened at OUP. That's about it. If anything major happens with the tablets during the meeting, like if it shuts down or you click out of it and don't know how to get back, just flag me down and I will covertly come over and help you, so that way we don't have to stop the whole meeting just to fix a tablet. Any questions? Did I skip over anything?
Thank you.
Great, yeah.
And you saw that Kathy had come in? Yeah. All right, very good. Under new businesses, next one is special presentation, the Rattlesnake Dam removal. Jeff? Good to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you all too. Thank you. It has been a while. I'm happy to be here today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm pretty sure I know a good deal of you, but for those who I may not, I'm Jeff McDonald, and I was retained recently by Trout Unlimited to assist them with a historic and cultural resource survey and evaluation for the Rattlesnake Creek Dam site, which is located just on the edge of the Rattlesnake Wilderness, outside of residential area. And prior to this project, I had never visited the site and was pleasantly surprised to see something so interesting and so tucked away, but certainly not forgotten. And tonight, I really wanted to just share with you some of the highlights from the survey and evaluation that we recently just completed. And while Rob Roberts with Trout Unlimited can certainly speak better to their plans and goals for the site and how they're looking to essentially develop through the almost reverse process of returning to the riparian system and restoring the creek bed to an original function. Now, like I said, I did not know really anything about the site prior to taking on this project, and Mr. Roberts informed me that they had been working with the city and actually had an MOU with them to basically look at the future of the dam site. The city now owns it as a result of the transfer from the mountain water purchase. So now came the time to really look at it closely, see what we had, and he had presented me with essentially the data that they had compiled to that point, combined with the records that the city has. We essentially worked together on identifying what their area of potential effect on the 8 would be, and was happy to see that Trout Unlimited was taking this already from the perspective of trying to tailor this to really what they needed to disturb. And that right away was very refreshing. And I want to say that the dialogue that I've enjoyed with them throughout this process has been very refreshing, to be able to look at this very much a development project, but with an entirely different viewpoint. And it was one that really brought in considerations of the natural environment and the built environment collectively, looking at this dam site for that original intention and purpose, to work with the local environment and the features of that environment to basically create a structure that became the first water filtration, containment, and conveyance system to the city of Missoula about the turn of the 20th century.
Is a guy that's probably the best ball handler in the league right now and can finish, but then if need be, he doesn't need the ball because he can space the floor because he had that balance and ability to be able to stretch the floor by catching and shooting. That wasn't Dwayne Wade's strength. That wasn't Isaiah Thomas' strength. One of those guys.
I don't think LeBron and Wade were a great fit. I think they both were just so good individually that they made it for a couple championships, you know?
Well, I agree. And honestly, if you look at those two big three, meaning LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, and LeBron, Kyrie, and Kevin Love, the guy who had to sacrifice the most is the third guy. So Kevin Love and Chris Bosh. Those are the guys that really had to sacrifice the most. Because those are the guys that had to put their egos on the shelf for that to work. Yeah. Kevin Love was once thought of as one of the best power forwards in the league. And think of Chris Bosh's reputation when he came to Miami. And those guys became third options. guys. That is the sacrifice for success, and they did it.
No doubt about it. Antonio, you are an analyst for the Pelicans, and you know all the rumblings out there, all the talk about Antonio Mostly Davis, speculation by the media. The Lakers. But let me ask you this before we even get to that part. What type of fit? I mean, his game isn't catch and shooting. You know, hypothetically, if they end up playing together, how do you think that would work, LeBron?
Man, Chris is trying to get me in trouble.
That's right.
Man, he's trying to get me in trouble.
Hey, Chris trying to do it. Don't do it, Bruce Bowen. Don't do it.
Oh, probably helps now. Thanks, Jim. We learned early on that this site had certainly importance to the native peoples of the region, particularly the Salish, and we wanted to be really upfront in bringing their considerations to the table, and that was something that I immediately brought up with Trout Unlimited, was had the tribes been consulted at least to gain any type of comment at all. And he mentioned that they had not formally, but the dialogue had been started, and so upon my recommendation, we got in touch with them, and I was happy to hear from Kyle Felsman there, Tippo, that they very much appreciated the opportunity to comment on the project, but had no comments at this time. And regardless of not producing any formal comment, the literature definitely indicates this region, and certainly the Rattlesnake into the Clark Fork, as a particularly important fishing ground. And that is, of course, part of the goal of Trout Unlimited, is to restore native fish habitat. And I'm sure Mr. Roberts will look forward to speaking to that at a future occasion. But I wanted to share this back history briefly, just to let everybody know of more or less the origins and these larger considerations that we were looking at right away. Among them were the original dam structure and any evidence of that appearance or its materials that may still be observed at the site. And in particular, this was mostly a dry stacked rubble dam site going back to about 1900. And then by the early 20s, and certainly by 1924 and 25, which coincided with the Montana Light and Power Company purchase, I want to say, that is when significant improvements were brought to the site and the current concrete dam was installed. Now, as everybody knows, Rattlesnake Creek is very much prone to seasonal runoff. That is something that people have noted for a long time. It's certainly been spectacularized in photos, and the Great Flood of 1908 certainly left its mark in that area. So, as a result, this site, too, has been, of course, subject to all the bombardment of seasonal runoff, from just water volume all the way to debris, and that is something that we'll pick up in a few minutes as we start to look at the materials of these resources that have remained. But at any rate, the drawings from 1924 and into 25 show at least the significance improvements. That elevation on the left and then the plot on the right are identifying more or less the creation of the current main spillway and those associated outbuildings. Among the more prominent that you still notice today would be the west screening tower, which you can see in the kind of upper corner dead ahead on the image on the left. It has a very interesting hip roof with some clay tile that is the type that you would see in similar uses throughout Missoula. So, moving back into the ape again and some of the features that we wanted to look at. The ones that were brought to my attention by Mr. Roberts, he guided a tour out there with me on 2 occasions for our pedestrian survey, and right away we wanted to at least note the most prominent features that we could date to that 1924 period. And so that list of 10 features is included here, and they include the main dam structure, their associated outbuildings, and features associated with the main reservoir, which is articulated in the left yellow. So I've kind of gone forward and just created a brief for you all just to kind of highlight these features, talk a little bit about their composition, some of the things that we observed by way of deterioration, and some just basic evaluations as to where they currently stand and where you might want to be making further action. So the first one we wanted to start with was the main spillway itself. This one was recently, I want to say 2011-12, received some work, and you can see in the upper right corner the before picture where it had a walkway that connected the east and west portions. As you can see in the bottom photo, that is how it currently looks. And owing to further site deterioration, those wires that you see in the immediate foreground are from a fractured utility pole, which is also on the site, creating a bit of a hazard at the moment. But this is important just to see, especially in the next images here, you can see the extent of the deterioration and the spalling that is evident. That channel on the west is really failing pretty quickly due to a cistern feature, which is capturing, as it appears, some type of runoff situation. That looks to have been in place for quite a long time. All of this concrete is contemporaneous to that 24-25 period. It's all board formed. It's of a pretty typical matrix of the period, so it's got a really chunky aggregate mingled with a lot of lime, and just through the freeze-thaw cycle and the constant bombardment, it's really been showing its wear and tear. Pardon me. On counterpart, the opposite side, we've included these screening building, although the pad and the associated mechanical structure, basically a system of valves that would be used to direct water. While it appears to be original, the screening building itself, as you can see, has been reclad and is pretty void of anything that could be construed as that 24-25 period. So this, as in appearance as a modern building, may still be retaining an original footprint. The west building, in contrast, has retained certainly its height and its roof and the associated features. I know the picture on the right's a little dark, but the soffit reveals some of that original detailing, and that is pretty much what remains of the original detailing. Immediately beneath the trim boards and the clapboard in particular is MDF, and that has been used extensively throughout the site. Pretty much anything that is painted gray now is that MDF replacement material, as well as the trim features. There are some basically readaptations, I would say, of earlier door features, it looks like, but they've been cut in half and spliced into old transoms. But that is pretty much right down the stairs on that left center photo. Otherwise, the original window systems have been covered over. From the inside, you can still make out some of those original divided light windows, but otherwise, from the exterior, it has pretty much been removed of all of its historic appearance. But it is one of the more interesting features of the site, though. That is that cistern I spoke of. It's also on the west side of the creek bank. It's very curious in that it seems to be literally built into the hillside to capture that type of runoff. And in some of the earlier photos you've seen along that sluiceway there where the concrete is failing most, it's really weeping through above, below, through. It's contributing to that constant saturation of that concrete. But this, again, is kind of a curious and site design feature in all appearance, and it appears to be, again, just an elevated cistern that was just put in place to try to capture runoff. The chlorination building is also among the decommissioned features of this site. Again, all of this is pretty much, it is offline. And this is another one that exhibits some original detailing in the soffit area around the rafters, but otherwise has been reclad, re-roofed, and has pretty much been updated as part of just overall maintenance to the site. Now, among the only real historical archaeological features that presented themselves were this rather interesting and improvised headgate, and it wasn't really a concrete line of reasoning, but what we could figure, and certainly from some of the LiDAR imagery we were able to enhance, is that by all indication it appears to support a drainage channel which is still very evident and running parallel to the creek, more or less all the way to the trailhead in the Rattlesnake. This, again, is highly deteriorated, but it's still an above-ground feature. There were no subsurface testing or any disturbance whatsoever in the scope of the survey. But this was one that presented itself as certainly one worth noting, and the location of where we found it. From there, there's just some isolated surface features, which include these pipe stubs, which are pretty much nothing more than sculptural at this point. But again, it's part of that era. and we wanted to at least include those site features as they look to develop the site, the overall dam site further. Same thing with this garage. While it exhibits some characteristics and research indicates it likely held a footprint, it's tough to say if it looked precisely like this building. This has been heavily reclad and reworked. So on to the main reservoir itself, and I'll just quickly go through these. This is basically a large basin, but what makes it rather interesting is on the extreme east side, you can see the remains of that rubble stone original system of containment for the reservoir. And that segues into a brand new piece, well, brand new by way of 1997, concrete section at the extreme north end, which was installed after that section failed. And basically they were just trying to stave off further failure of the site. Just a couple more angles of the reservoir itself. That westernmost wall, which runs parallel to the creek, is rather remarkable that it's supporting that much water load. I believe this was drained not all that long ago to do some sampling, and there's probably an environmental assessment that Mr. Roberts or Trout Unlimited can share as well in some more of those details. But all of the concrete exhibited pretty much the same rate and extent of decay and failure that you would expect from something of its age. This was also among the features of the North Head Gate, which retained some of its original mechanics. And these are really just fascinating big old wheel systems and screw systems to just raise and lower those sluice gates. But there's a lot of failure in and around this section. So just kind of in summation on the whole, this just basically sums up the approach that was taken to investigating beyond the pedestrian survey. Like I mentioned, we investigated the existing literature and the records that were found at the University of Montana that Trout Unlimited had compiled and combined with the city. Beyond that, again, there was consultation with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, who returned a no comment on the project and also not really concerned about anything at this time. But there was some really interesting literature out there too, just on the state of small dams in America too. And again, everything seemed consistent with just what could be expected from the rate of deterioration and the pathology that you could associate with this type of material, its typical usage and its pattern of deterioration over time. So while this site I would consider important to the city and part of the city's history, the city's growth, there was not anything in the process of a National Register evaluation that provided enough evidence that we could link it to any particular criteria, either individually or as the site as a whole. So at this point, we're not making any recommendations for a National Register of Historic Places nomination. I've also been in touch with Montana SHPO, and we provided a CRIS form to Damon. So that has been received and filed. So it has a Smithsonian trinomial. You folks can certainly access that to gain some more insight. And at this point, I basically had passed on these recommendations to Trout Unlimited, who I would imagine will be taking this up further with you folks. Among my recommendations, though, I did think, if at all possible, that it would be important to retain a representative sample of what that earlier dam structure resembled. And there was certainly plans to put forth a pretty robust interpretation package, as I understand it. Again, Trout Unlimited can speak to that, those particulars better than I. But I think, first of all, that's fantastic to have this site continue to tell a story, but also to tell the story of why we're looking to return it back to original function and restore that native habitat and restore it for not just the fish species, not just for the cultural considerations, but for all of our future considerations. And so this is one of those odd positions I find myself in as a preservationist, to be looking at this a little bit more abstractly and not necessarily be advocating for demolition, but more or less be outlining what are the facts, where the conditions are at this point, and any position the city might have as far as future investment in this site and what that investment might be. And so, again, I was very grateful to be included with Trout Unlimited's evaluation assessment, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing where this project goes forward. So I provided some references too, just for everybody's benefit, to see some of the other things that are being talked about out there, and certainly we can talk about this some more.
Well, I have
Happy to
tell
take some
you,
questions.
I have the honor of being one of the 167 people that got Giardia during this event tonight. So,
I don't want to congratulate you on that distinction, Jim.
anyway, then they closed it down, of course, and went to the wells. But anyway, any questions for Jeff or comments?
So,
I went a little over the 15 minutes I had. I apologize.
You're fine.
Sorry, Steve. Go ahead.
no, I guess I'm a little unclear on what the ultimate goal is for the site. Is it to return it back to original landscaping and take everything out? Or is it to return the function of trout going up and down the stream unhindered, and that's about it? There's a wide range in there, and where in the range does that fall?
From the best I understand, and again, I can only speak so much for Trout Unlimited.
Sure.
It is my understanding that they are looking to restore the function of the creek to basically originality. There was a presentation that they made to some city folks in November, and it was the first opportunity I had to see where ultimately they're looking to steer this. So paraphrasing from that, I'll try to fill in some of the gaps here. The things that I saw, first of all, were fascinating by how they're looking to repair just the creek system, the methods, the materials, the way they bring in baffles and basically reline and recreate historic function, historic appearance, and basically encouraging that return of native habitat from flora, fauna, what have you.
Yeah.
The things that also were rather interesting that were brought up with her, and where the ape got trimmed a little bit at one of the corners. I should mention too, there's some pendant kind of areas where they're looking at as the staging ground, the construction ground for any type of demo, removal, and storage of materials. All of that too, they're looking to repurpose essentially fill for the reservoir basin itself. Everything that was peeled back originally is basically looking to be pushed forward again, essentially upstream. And it borders the Forest Service land by maybe 100 yards. And so it's already, from this last image, a perfect segue from that north head gate. You can see where it enters that first ripple and onto just the native habitat immediately to the north. That essentially is the best image I guess I can provide of what they're looking to, the ultimate goal is. But to not disturb things that have already been revealed to be important. Among them were these biological considerations. There's a little pocket which they had some biologists date to anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 years old, I believe, and it's just an undisturbed little micro pocket. So these are the things that get the environmental folks very excited, and for me it was very interesting to see again how that built environment interwove with it all and the things they're thinking about. So again, I can only speak maybe to the spirit and the motivation behind it at this point, and I have no doubt that they'll be presenting some much more detailed schematics for you folks.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Is there any, I guess my question is time frame? How soon? I know that money's always a factor and there's always logistics and lots of agencies to go through, but do they have any kind of a time frame on how soon they want to accomplish this?
I don't believe it's in a rush. I don't believe there's a need to push it through either, and more the contrary, they're very, very cautious to make sure that they're going through the process properly and looking at everything that not only they need to do, but maybe they should do. And so I would expect some further environmental assessments. Again, they're really thinking this through broadly enough that I don't see any real particular time frame established on it at this point. From my side, and there was no real rush to bring all this information to you folks either, this was more or less time for them to look at what can be accomplished over the winter. As you know, you get into a summer and a time where it's easier to just do things, of course. So that would be my only inclination, I think, as far as just that short window, that we're in right now.
I'm just thinking about the one building with the soffits that were still intact, and when you think about returning it back the way that they'd like to see, I don't know, what role does that building continue to play, or do you think that,
My personal feeling on it is, for all of it, if it's something that emerges and it's important for everybody, let it be important for everybody. And that's why I at least am bringing it to everybody's attention today. Now, how that is scaled, again, in a national, broad type of way is one thing. How you want to tailor it down to what does Missoula think? What does Missoula want? How do you want to remember this site? Is it possible to just retain that and have some type of watchtower, something where people could go up and survey the whole site and as a whole? Absolutely. And so these should be part of the concerns that are brought forward in any other type of, as designs come your way. The same reason why I recommended that representative sample be retained of any type of where possible, that rubble stone system. It's very important, I think, to just conveying that continuum of the site, that it started from that very humble position, and then it evolved into that period in the 20s, which was also a very interesting period, I think, of growth in this city, but certainly should be among those ones that you could tack on as an addenda to further recommendations, and maybe we want to look at that hip roof and its original features a little more closely. I would absolutely support that, you bet.
Yeah, because how does that roof relate to the buildings at the fort? Because it's the same tiles.
It seemed contemporaneous, yes.
Yeah.
And while we didn't get up close enough to do a thorough inspection to see if you had a stamp or a mark, anything we can make a direct attribution to, doesn't mean we can't do a follow-up analysis on some specific features like that. And that could prove very interesting to see how you could link it to some other clay tile use throughout the city. And folks like yourselves, too, are much more familiar with that use, and maybe we could just tie it in a lot more quickly. But there was certainly terracotta works, brickworks, in and around the area of Ogren Park, I think, around that time period. So there was a lot of that material being turned out. So again, it gets back to that representative sample equation and where we want to lock it down. So,
Thank you.
yeah, yes, ma'am. Steve?
Yeah, so the discussion seems to assume that there will be kind of returning the property to public access?
Yes.
So that it will be more publicly accessible?
That's correct.
Is that the working assumption then?
Yes, and everything I have seen throughout the scope of the pedestrian survey has led me to believe that they are very proactive in moving forward on all of those other tertiary elements, you could say. That also builds on the history of the site when it was in ownership of Montana Light and Power, I believe, in the 50s, 60s. There were picnic grounds out there. It was pretty much an encouraged recreation area. All of that is being looked toward as retained usage and expanded usage. And so, again, there's a real neat and robust interpretive package that's going, which is exciting.
Okay, that'd be great. I have some memories of hiking up there with friends and sitting on the headgate.
Yes. But the headgate might resemble something else.
But still, being able to
Sure enough, yes.
being able to go back without cutting through fences or hopping fences, that would be nice.
It would be, and I think that, yes, Steve, is the idea to return that whole use holistically, and looking at it more for its nature contributions, essentially a cleanup, if you will. And,
Cool.
But again, I look forward to the presentation that Trout Unlimited will be giving to you folks too.
Right.
And the engineering reporting from Morrison Merrily was outstanding too. And so those folks were representative at the meeting in November. And just from the sketch level right now, they're taking this in all the right directions as far as looking at it from just tiered possibilities. You brought up funding. Certainly that's a consideration. I think a big part of their motivation is to look at these local considerations first before they would go after FEMA funding or something, linked more toward those, broader development patterns.
Right.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Just comment that bring up the head gate, and the first thing I thought when I saw was, the industrial ruins and how that is equally important for a local place. Reminds me of Gasworks Park, and you already mentioned a memory, and you already laughed, and that's something that we should also consider too, especially if it's opened up to the public, not completely ridding. I think that historic preservation has a serious role to play in environmental justice and reminders of what happened to a place, and completely ridding is something we need to consider too. So,
agreed. Like I said, this was very refreshing because we were looking at this directly from an overall environmental perspective, not just a built environment, not just a natural environment. It's one that really brought together the two, and it's certainly something you can link to industrial heritage. I mean, this is one of Missoula's first industry. There were a lot of these dam structures that popped up. But this one is interesting, again, from just the fact that it has kind of existed behind a fence line, for many decades. And so it's neat when you get to see those things that are kind of cordoned off from the public. But as you pointed out, Steve, how neat now to return it back to public use. And so it's a city property.
Be refreshing.
You guys can have some fun with it.
Not yet. Jeff is the cultural resource consultant for that. And after this presentation, we haven't set up anything. It has been moving slowly. I think the city hasn't gone through this process yet before. So we're all taking it day by day. It's brand new to everyone as to how to go about this. But kind of like what Jeff said, I think everyone's trying to work together and work slowly on it and bring forth the information before anything's really done. So that's my feeling. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, is there anything at this point, too, that you want to see more of? I mean, like you mentioned, I'm happy to keep consulting and acting as intermediary between you folks and Trout Unlimited. They are an MOU partnership with the city. So, again, if it just helps to communicate ideas and just kind of establish what y'all are going to be looking for, what I'm trying to say is I'm happy to be coming back, as future meetings.
Based on what I hear, I'm assuming an interpretation plan will be part of the overall scheme that we could help them with through you.
Absolutely.
I don't know what the appropriate forum is, but it'd be great to take a hike up there sometime, maybe not in the middle of winter, but
Sure.
And tour the place and then start talking about what is important to the community, open it up to the community. Maybe we can get some input. And then talk about what the possibilities and what the priorities are.
I think that sounds perfect.
So, and we have a question in the back there. Could you come forward to the microphone and state your name, and then we can get. Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you have a question?
Sure, I'll ask it as a question. It appears as though a lot of the description after the presentation would justify eligibility for the National Register at the local level. There's a lot of significance to a lot of people, and there's planned interpretation. So why is it not eligible for the National Register at the local level?
I'm sorry?
You don't mind answering this question?
Sure.
And this is all preliminary too.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. This is all just really putting forth these local considerations. So from the national perspective, we're looking at it from just the evaluation criteria, its association with people, with significant events within the broader scope of national history, any significant architectural merits that would exemplify it beyond the ordinary or typical, and or any type of archaeological considerations. Yes, so those would be the integrity then would refer to is at least 50% intact from its original form, function, feel, association, all of those other variables. As I was mentioning earlier, especially with the cladding and the buildings where you were seeing that type of deterioration just from the increased thaw cycle and also the flooding that would occur from seasonal runoff, it's understandable that they would be replacing those materials over time, and we'd be left with the MDF that we have currently. And so that is a non-historic material and definitely contributes to an assessment of especially exterior integrity where you're looking at the primary function of those details. Interiors become a whole other set of considerations. So from just baseline perspective, there's nothing evident at this point to make it eligible for a national register consideration. But I did mention to these folks that it is important to consider it for its local contribution. So if it's on a local register or some type of local distinction, there's certainly an argument for that because it is part of that history, which has led us to the discussion we're having now of how can we at least retain some representative samples of that history and its continuing into the future. So again, this is just the evaluation from current standpoint with current knowledge, looking at it from a national perspective, not necessarily a local. And Bill?
Thank you. No. And there'll be more on this in the future, months, probably in the next 6 months. Thank you.
I would expect so. Again, not aware of any immediate timetable for it, but I think this can certainly be steered by you folks, and as you're saying, it's however you want to pick up the dialogue and engage Trout Unlimited. They are very much spearheading this whole project and looking at other funding opportunities, which then, of course, would bring it into a different set of considerations. So, but at this point, we're just looking at it from what are the ones at least to focus on and the things we wanted to bring your attention today. But I certainly agree with you, Steve. The best thing to do is go out and get a feel for it yourself and just kind of see how the sum of the parts come together to tell that bigger narrative.
And I think this is a great conversation for us to have. And I've been in communication with Rob Roberts of Trout Unlimited. So if HPC, if we want to, dial down our concerns and our thoughts, just send them my way, and we can talk to Rob, and he's offered to come and talk about it too. So this is just opening that dialogue and opening that conversation.
Happy to help with all of that again. Like this was today, just an opportunity to bring it all to your attention. So, my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you. My pleasure. Here, we'll get him later.
I'm just going to add a new slide for the folks watching on MCAT here, just real quick. Can you guys hear me? Is it on? Seems like it, okay. Okay. Good question. Okay. My name is Solomon Martin. I am the first alternate. Early last year, I remember at one of our meetings, we talked about what a good idea it would be if we would kind of take turns doing show and tell and giving presentations about what we did outside of this room. And I, as a private contractor, had a really wonderful and unique opportunity to work on a really interesting historical project over the summer. So I have just a few slides. I have about 100 slides, so if I spend about 6 minutes or 6 seconds a piece on them, I'll take about 12, 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to hurry through this. First couple of slides are just a little bit about the history of the site, and then the last 80 or so slides are just kind of the nitty-gritty bare bones of, well, this is what we did, just to kind of show sometimes historical preservation it gets some dirt under your fingernails and has a special set of circumstances or problem solving that well, I'll quit talking and I'll just kind of start showing you what I'm talking about here. So let's start in we could start in 1854. Commodore Matthew Perry opens up Japan to American trade. A few years later, in 1860, they send their first delegates, and the first time in 200 years, the Japanese set up an embassy in Washington, D.C., and then they very hastily, in the next coming decades, modernize and industrialize and become an imperial power. We all kind of know that story. But in the course of that social upheaval in Japan, Japanese immigrants started coming to the west coast of this country, beginning around the turn of the 20th century. Those first immigrants were called Issei, which is a Japanese word for first or settler. And then they really, by the middle of the 30s, you can see here, I'm going to actually go to the actual slideshow. Find that. So, by the 30s, they've got baseball clubs. They've fully integrated into United States society, and everything is pretty hunky-dory. They've established themselves about a couple 100,000 immigrants and their descendants by 1940, and were well known for their agricultural prowess in the Central Valley in particular. So December 7th, 1941, Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. Pretty a big upset. In February of the following year, so just over 2 months later, Roosevelt issues a Executive Order 9066, which says all persons of Japanese ancestry must report within, I think it was 72 hours, to their temporary relocation areas, which were mostly fairgrounds and the racetracks, large open fields, things like that, where they were kind of rounded up. They were, a lot of them had the wherewithal to, board up their shops. There was a lot of shop owners, a lot of farm owners. They were either forced to sell or just close everything up, and they could only take what they could carry. And it really was, they were not called internment centers. That's a new term. They were actually called concentration camps at the time, so that's an important part of the story. Here's the exclusion zone. And you can see these black dots. There were 8 of these relocation camps. Here's Hart Mountain's location, right outside of Cody, Wyoming, near Yellowstone Park. It's about an 8-hour drive from Missoula, Montana, which, although we do know that there were Japanese internees here in Missoula, they were not classified as relocation centers. So that's why we're not on this map. So I just put up some bullet points here for you guys to look at on your own time, just some kind of interesting historical narratives that are kind of throughout this story here. The story of the Japanese immigrant community, the Issei and the Nisei, starting around the turn of the 20th century. Of course, we all know about the Pearl Harbor incident, and World War II is a pretty big chapter. Also, Executive Order 9066. Another interesting historical story that's directly tied to the internment center there in Cody is the Shoshone Irrigation Project and the story of Buffalo Bill Cody. He was a very early 1890s developer that started the irrigation project, and it was finished in part by Japanese internees. It's a pretty extensive irrigation project, and it was completely finished in 1946. Another really interesting story that comes out of the Hart Mountain Relocation Center camp is the story of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. It was a decorated service unit that fought in Germany in the later part of the war. And then also the No-No Boy movement, which was kind of the opposite. There were some draft resistors within the network of camps, and they had what we kind of formalized a patriotic resistance, if you will. These and other stories can all be found at www.heartmountain.org. It's a great kind of bootstrap local organization that owns the property and is building a really, really great world-class museum there. So please, if you have time, check out that website for a lot more history. So in 1942, The internees were relocated from their temporary camps on the West Coast to those 8 camps that we talked about. And it was decided by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that they should be self-sufficient as much as possible. And so an agricultural program was established, and the need for some massive root cellars to store all the produce the plan was initiated. So here is some sectional view of the Army Corps of Engineer. These are the original blueprints. You can see here they were 400 feet long and about 50 feet wide, and you'll see the construction in the photographs here in a minute. Covered with about 2 feet of dirt. It's a really simple log structure. You can see here that there was, they prescribed a third door in the middle of the structure, and for reasons we don't know, that door does not exist. It was never installed. Here are some other detail drawings. We have some very few historical photos of the structure itself, but we can tell that the existing elevations do not match these historical drawings, and we're still having discussions about what's original and what isn't. So, here's an overview of the site plan itself. At its peak, there was over 14,000 Japanese citizens living in the camp, and it was at the time, I think it was the 3rd or 4th largest municipality in the state of Wyoming at the time. Pretty extensive. There was a high school, a hospital complex, blocks and blocks and blocks of residential zones. They're not shown in this picture, but extensive agricultural areas. Pretty much everything you'd need, a post office, social clubs, everything you'd need for a city of 15,000 people.
Where's the root cellar?
So, yeah, good question. The root cellar are these. There was 2 of them built side by side alongside, this is a railroad track. So the internees were actually able to trade. They weren't allowed to sell their produce, but they were able to trade amongst other camps. There was a railroad siding here for them to load the produce onto rail cars. So that's what that is right here, and I think I have a photo of that here in a minute. But those 2 little red marks, those are the locations of the root cellars. And just to give you some idea what the scale is, that little tiny red mark there is 400 feet long. So you can kind of have some imagination of the scale of the size of the place, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers, of course, as well. Here's a picture of what we believe is the west entrance that is from the newspaper, so this is right directly after it was completed in the spring of 1943. You can't really see this image. This is the hospital boiler stack, and that's the reason that I was down there in the first place. I was a part of restoring that structure in 2011, 2012. Here is a picture of that same entrance. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Sorry, guys. That same entrance that we see here, that's, 60, 70 years later. That's what it looks like. That's what it still looks like, pretty much. Here's kind of a view looking northwest. This is Hart Mountain itself. Northwest, about 50 paces from the edge of the structure itself. That second structure, the second one was collapsed back in the 60s and was here just to the north of the existing structure. It's a little bit blurry, but here's what it kind of looks like as you walk in that door. And at some point during its history, after the war, all of the structures and all of the land was parceled off and put up for auction by the Army Corps of Engineers and was bought by a lot of local landowners. So you can see that they have, because of the hydrology of the soil, a lot of these structural elements were starting to shift and sink. So you can see where they tried to fix that with these concrete blocks. One of the initial things that we did was to trim out a 1/4 mile long run of sagebrush to put up a safety fence because local livestock and children were crawling over the top of this thing. It's a pretty remote area, so we had to do a lot of labor by hand. Then we excavated the top. I believe I calculated for the 10% of the total area of the structure that was part of this project, just that 10% of the whole area was about 80 cubic yards of dirt to move by hand. This is our one and only significant archaeological find, right in that same location where this gentleman was digging, was right where we found this Bull Durham how to roll a cigarette package. Like I said, 80 yards of dirt moved by hand. Took a crew of 5 to 6 people about a week to accomplish. And that's kind of what it looks like. That's what we call the east end, fully excavated in the project area. And I'll point out this what we call a hogback. You can kind of see, the amount of deflection there along that ridge line shows that those structural elements have sunk into the soft soil, 12, 18 inches in places. So that became an immediate, we knew that was one of the larger logistical issues that we had trying to fix this, or restore, rehabilitate, or what have you, to the structure. So one of the more important things that we did was establish new grade for adequate drainage. Wind and weather were a huge factor down there. This is just outside of Yellowstone Park, and it's a high desert, arid climate, but the wind and the rain does really come down, and this big witch's mess here is kind of a last, we're fighting tornadoes as they come in. So you can see just in the course of about 5 minutes, we had enough rainfall to fill up our sheet plastic through one of the vent holes. Also, like I said, I would keep mentioning this soft soil. There's pretty substantial subsidence. You can see that pin flag line looking to the east. That's a couple of 100 feet down the structure. The whole thing is actively collapsing. We've got pictures from 2015 compared to pictures of 2018, and we can see literally inches of movement in some of these structural issues or things. There is a crew. I'd like to point out big friendly thanks to a local archaeologist and Professor Chris Finley. He was there as a consultant. And just all around great guy, really enthusiastic about the project. He was a lot of help. The rest of these guys, about half of them were out of work firefighters. They were waiting for the things to catch on fire, and the timing was just about perfect. Here's one of the more iconic elements of the whole structure with these vents. You saw some of those earlier. These were spaced about every 10 feet. Alternating in rows of 3 all the way down. They were stuffed with straw and had little witches' caps on them, and we'll see some more pictures of those. But you can see, this is what we're working with. This is what we're trying to restore. This is what we're trying to preserve. And obviously, there's really not much there. So what do you do? Well, the first thing we did is we built a site map. We marked the location of every single vent. And then the vents, these X's, are where the vents are actually missing, where we can't find any associated wood to go with them. And what we found is a lot of locals would come and collect birdhouses over the years. So we built a site map, and we disassembled them, put them on our work table, labeled them, and what we did was we got kind of dorky about it. We pulled them apart and labeled each individual piece with its orientation to the building and to the surroundings. So each one of these pieces of blue tape is, it's third from bottom, facing south or facing southwest, etc. And the reason that we did that, we bundled them up until we were ready for reconstruction, is we wanted to do the best job we could. And it was really kind of surprising, as bunky as all that wood was, we were really surprised at how much we were able to visually preserve. This is a technique that we that was brought to my attention by one of my employees is to reuse the original nail holes. Well, we just put toothpicks in them, and then drive the nail in past the toothpicks, and we regain that original tension purchase. So that was a little, you pick up things like that when you're. So anyway, we tried to reuse as much of the original material as possible, and obviously had to go to a local mill and had some new boards sawn up to replace the missing pieces.
Were they circle sawn?
Yes, they were, and that's kind of the 10% that we were working on the east end. We got lucky because all the boards were kind of the same, and then as you go towards the west, I think there's probably 180, 190 of these vents. You find, we know based on historical photographs that they built from east to west, and as you go west, there's more and more hodgepodge. Not all the wood is the same, so it's kind of interesting. You can tell that they were just using whatever was available readily and cheap and quick. So that was kind of fun to sleuth that out. Definitely had some broken, rotten, more of the structural elements. So those were replaced. This is an example of the base of one of those column posts. This is just below soil level, and you can just see that the water table is very, very high in this location. And it makes the sound that you dig down 1.5 feet and you're basically in mud. So that was definitely a problem. So we fixed it with concrete. I've got a couple of pictures of employees laying down on the job. And then one of the other big things that we did was we actually tried to manipulate these bents with a series of jacks and come-alongs and pulleys and just really simple mechanical tools. We're able to lift and manipulate these bents back into more or less their original position. We were able to lift this arc up about the length of this jack, actually, over the course of 3 or 4 days, a couple inches at a time. And at a certain point, it was scary because a lot of things start to hiss and crack and pop. So basically, we just kind of went real systematically and just cradled these columns and their structures up and just gently lifted them as much as we could. You can kind of see what we're working against there. Some of these elements were really, really far out of plumb. And you can see just the extent of the movement that we get from the walls. This is looking down from the top of the wall. You can see how much, by lifting and jacking, how much we've pulled that wall back into plumb. We were pretty proud of ourselves that day. You can also see what kind of movement we were able to attain by looking at this nail line. If you see, it's off center pretty substantially from the ridge line or from that rafter line. And we were aided by a really large crowbar. We also decided to replace one of the rafters, this is a 3-day project that you're looking at. We're really fortunate to have a log cart. Like I said, we did most of this work by hand power. We had really limited availability of power tools, and it was just really hard for us to use them anyway because you're working off of a skeleton roof. It's really hard to get a bobcat in any place that was usable. This is kind of the working platform that we built. We were able to roll out our log onto its awaiting post and spike it in place. Chris Finley, by the way, is 76 years old. He was always the first one to work at the morning, one of the last ones to leave, and I literally had to fight him to get tools out of his hands because he was supposed to be a consultant, not a laborer, but just a really great character, really interesting guy, and really just couldn't keep tools out of his hand. Then it was time to put the roof back on. We were supposed to reuse the original material, but it was pretty badly termite eaten. So we made the decision to replace all of the roof sheathing with new material that was sourced locally and cut to the approximate dimension of the original material. And here's an employee mimicking the historical look. He's taking out the saw lines, taking out the curve cuts with a hatchet just to make it look like the original tooling. This is all pretty self-explanatory. So there's quite a bit of wildlife in the area, and there was a lot of foxes and raccoons and rabbits, and they did a lot of time burrowing in behind the walls. So we spent quite a bit of time actually stuffing straw back in behind the wallboard sheathing and filling these rather massive gaps with straw to recreate the original look. After that, we put a layer of straw and bentonite on the roof. And this would have been the original construction. Now that we're in the 21st century, we go a step further and we put some EPDM fabric over the top of that material. This weighed about 800 pounds. It took 6 of us all day to spread out. It was it was fun. We had to build a crane to make that happen, to roll it up and over the roof peak. We're able to reestablish electricity to the site so we could put in exit signs and flood lamps. The intent for the museum is to eventually open this up as a walkthrough exhibit. Then we reinstalled the vents. We did take the tape off. Reinstall the vents. Spent some time accounting for the new design with EPDM and the drainage factors, hopefully to avoid that rotten out system that we saw at the beginning of the slideshow. Like I said, a lot of guys just laying around on the job. Covered the whole thing back up with dirt, and then in October I drove back down there and seeded it with natural grass. So hopefully it will blend back into as it originally was supposed to. It'll kind of blend back into the prairie. This is just some record drawings for the contractual basis. Just kind of showing, you can't really see it that well, but those are all the purlin count. All those little pink lines are replacement purlins, and you can't really see all the details, but ended up replacing probably about 30% of the material. Had a drainage slope plan so that when water does seep down to that soil level, it's going to hit this and evacuate to the sides. So sometimes you got to make an improvement over a historical thing than just replacing kind. And that's kind of what it looks like as we left at the end of August of 2018. Here's some stress plates in between the rafters that we used to hide. We put in some seismic strapping, some steel strapping, so we're replacing the original blocks of wood with metal and then covering them up with the facsimile blocks of wood. You can see the original there. There are some other excellent buildings on the site. This is a hospital mess hall up on the bluff. As you can see, this is currently owned by the Bureau of Reclamation, although they're trying to bequeath it to the museum. It's going to take an act of Congress to do that, unfortunately, so it might be a couple of years. In the meantime, I volunteered myself and my crew to put some some temporary roofing on this structure. And as I was down there in October, the wind is so vicious that over half of this had been ripped off already in the space of 2 months. So, but there are, if you're ever down in the neighborhood, if you're ever going to Yellowstone, definitely stop in at the museum, check these buildings out. There's just a lot of interesting history to walk around and check out. There's that smokestack that I mentioned earlier. This is the hospital power plant. There was no running water or electricity or any kind of plumbing or heating besides potbelly cold stoves in all of the barracks except for the hospital because they wanted to keep their sheets clean for the sick. So they had a hot water plant, coal-fired hot water plant that also had steam tunnels running to the hospital wards that are, you can't see them here, but they're concrete vaults underneath the ground there. And that's it for the presentation. There's another guy laying down on the job. I hope that took less than 15 minutes. And I have plenty of time for questions either now or after the meeting. Right. So, and that was the reason that a lot of that recontouring happened is because over the decades, you could see it visually on the lee side of the hill, the dirt load was substantially higher. So the solution that we had for that is we put down a jute erosion control blanket, like basically heavy duty burlap. And so we put that down, and then hopefully that will stay long enough for the native grass seed to establish itself and just form a living mat. But yeah, it's an ongoing maintenance thing for sure.
Any other questions?
Did they get the car out of the other end?
What's that?
Oh, I was down there years ago and they had a car
yeah.
down in the far end.
Yeah, so we actually, the next door neighbors purchased that parcel from the BOR post-war, and they used it as a potato cellar. And then after that, we think they used it for a chicken coop for a while, and then finally they parked junk vehicles down there.
There was one that was a unique little car, actually, from somebody who could identify it.
Somebody said, because we'd had visitors from time to time, somebody came in and said that, yeah, there used to be DeLoreans parked down here. So, anyway. So, yeah, thank you, everybody. It was nice to be able to share kind of what I do. And if you have any other questions later, just hit me up. I'll be hanging out after the meeting.
All right. Thanks, Solomon.
Thank you.
All right. Old business. Need to elect a chair and vice chair this evening. I was 2 years ago when we got reorganized again after the mercantile. I was asked to be chair for a couple of years, and my term is up.
So thank you, Jim, for your volunteering on the board and chair position. I really appreciate it. I'd like to suggest nominate Jolene as the chair for 2019. If she'll accept it.
Well, we can do it as, is there a vice chair nomination? We could just do both as once, or if there's several, we'll have to go through.
I'll nominate Paul.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any other nominations? Is there a motion?
Is the nomination the de facto motion?
Yeah, just
So then,
to approve.
so move to approve Jolene as chair and Paul as vice chair?
Second, okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. I guess I can just finish out it tonight. Usually we just turn it right over, but I'll finish it out. Is that okay? Yeah, might as well. Education and public awareness, we need to talk about Preservation Month. I've had two requests, mainly from my Molly class, that they want to do, several people have expressed interest in hoping that we'll have a tour of one of the historic districts to talk about different styles of architecture and periods. And probably what it would be the best is to do the university area and the university itself and talk about the different periods all the way up to the mid-century modern period and even later. So that is one that's come up. And then the other one is that in the September Rock and Roll Week, we had a tour of Gibson, bicycle tour of A.J. Gibson's buildings, and nobody showed up except for one person. So, but for some reason people didn't get on the website where everything was and to see it was there. So now there are a lot of people who want another bicycle tour. I guess the question is if we do it in the spring or we do it during Rock and Roll Week again, because that seems to be the best for. But anyway, I guess at this point, those are just my comments. If anybody else has the other comments, but I wonder if we could get a committee together. I'd be glad to be on it. 2 or 3 people, and see if we can come up with some possibilities that we can present at the next meeting for some different events during May Preservation Month. The other big question too is we talked a little bit about whether we would have awards every year or we would have it every other year, and that was really not decided. Has anybody got any comments on that or what we might want to do? And I should back up. Let me just talk a little bit more. One of the things is that what happens is when this all gets put in, we put in a lot of nominations, not a lot of information, and so it tends to be Emmy, or other people trying to go out and get all this information put together and get the awards put together and get them to us to be approved and come up with a final list. And I guess what we're asking this year is if we're going to do awards, we need to have more people help out and help putting that together, or make sure if an award comes in, it has all the information. If it doesn't, then I think we just have to let it go. But we have to have some way of getting all the information ahead of time so that we don't have to go out and do all the research and the photography and everything else for these awards. So that would be the best thing if we could make sure that those nominations are complete, and if not, then if more members of the commission could also help in putting some of that information together. So those are just my comments as far as the awards ceremony. We also talked about a speaker during either maybe the first weekend or at the May meeting. And I think there was a suggestion last time, and I forgot who it was.
I remember I brought up the Portland HPO.
Oh, right. Yeah. There was interest in that. Yeah. So I guess if we could get a committee together, like I say, I'd like to be on it. Anybody else that would like to be on it? 2 or 3 of us would like to get together in the next week or so and to start planning for a presentation at the February meeting of how we want to proceed. Okay. So looks like 4 of us. Yeah, it'd be called a subcommittee. Well, let's see. That's going to be a quorum, isn't it?
It'd be a subcommittee, but even if we have quorum, it's treated the same way. So I would just take care of that.
So any meetings we have, we'll just, what is it, 2 days before?
Yeah.
Or 48 hours before?
It's okay if we have quorum.
Yeah, we can put on, okay, all right. Yeah, so, Okay, we'll just plan on the four of us then, and we'll set up some times, and then if you can just get it through the proper channels, that'd be great.
Yeah, if you guys could just let me know when you're meeting, I can arrange a place and then I'll post it.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, all right, good. Do we want to set up a first meeting tonight? Is there, I don't have my calendar with me. Should we do it midweek? Is that the best? Like Wednesdays or something? Maybe a lunch or either that or like 4 o'clock? That's better for people to.
Weeks in the evening, midweek, or later afternoon would work better for me.
Okay. So like maybe a 4 o'clock meeting on 2 weeks from yesterday, which would be the 16th. All right. How's that work?
So, did you say the 16th?
Yeah, is that Wednesday?
Mhm.
4 o'clock? We can do it down at our offices?
I don't think we have, well, we may have a room available upstairs, yeah, that's true. Not downstairs.
That'll probably be the best. So everybody okay with that for the first meeting? Then if we need another one, we'll get that worked out. So, okay? And come with ideas and things that we can do for Preservation Month. Anything else on that? Okay. Preserve Historic Missoula, not here. We received in email yesterday the new rendering of the front of the Studebaker building. Do we need to look at that and make comments, or is everybody okay with that, or what do we want to do? We've got it on the computer, right?
Yeah, do you want me to bring it up?
I think we should bring it
Okay.
up. Yeah, why don't we?
I just saw that I thought it looked better, elevation looked better. But I wondered if there was a reason for not matching the color of the rest of the church. For the infill panels.
Okay.
I don't know if there's
Well, let's go ahead and look at that if you could, and if you have any other comments.
And I looked at it. The Studebaker building was originally a carriage repair shop and a car dealership, right?
Studebaker.
Yeah. And weren't there originally garage doors at those locations? And did we compare their proposal to any historic photos that we have, or do we have any historic photos?
There were some historic photos in the application, and the original garage door was on the left side. And that's all that we have in terms of historic photos. So the fenestration that they're proposing doesn't match the original. So that left side garage door was infilled over time. And then they're proposing to just use that same opening with the windows with new garage doors. So it wouldn't be the original garage door location.
Oh, it's not the original opening. Right, okay.
So originally, historically, this was a garage door opening from the few historic photos that we have. And then this has been infilled over time. So this is the update, is filling in here. And this is what it looks like now. This was their original proposal. And so we discussed filling this in with their proposal to emulate what it is now. So where were we?
we pretty much, well, we did approve the concept with this additional comment of looking at something else besides all glass going clear down to the ground. And they came back with this proposal. And I guess I don't see any problem with it personally. Anybody else have any comments? Or?
Bruce, could you elaborate a little bit about your comment?
Just my initial look at it. Wondered why you wouldn't match the color of the other surrounds, the windows and doors,
Yeah.
with the infill panels. That was it.
So is
I
it-
don't have a problem with this.
Yeah.
I don't think we know if the red is original or not, so,
Sure it's not.
yeah.
Amy, did you have a staff recommendation for this? Or is it too apart?
Yeah, so we decided last time to approve with conditions, which were kind of the normal conditions that we usually put on, with the exception of infilling down here based on this updated rendering, which we just received yesterday. And so the motion that we made was to approve that, but I definitely want to make sure that we're all okay with this new rendering before staff actually approves it. And I can still reach out to Paradigm and discuss further if we want to.
I have one question. I think one of the previous renderings showed the panel over the double door as being glass. Is it now an infill panel?
No,
Is
that hasn't changed.
Above the red doors, that's glass?
That's glass.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it just looks dark in the other rendering, like
Yeah, it
it's
does.
the panel color. If you go to the next rendering down, or next after that, it just looked like that's what I saw.
Yeah, that's
just
odd. That
had to ask.
wasn't part of the original proposal. That shouldn't have changed. I'll be sure and reach out and double check on that before we approve it.
Anybody have any comments or concerns?
And Amy, I already sent you my comments, so, like Bruce, I agree.
Okay.
Do you need written comments from each
No.
of us? Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Member comments, anything? All right, staff report?
Can I actually call out a few of the members to make comments? Jolene was at what was it called?
Like a climate change
Resiliency. So Jolene was at a resiliency meeting on behalf of the HPC, and Kathy had an idea about putting together a workshop for storm windows. So if you guys could both talk about that. And Paul is on the cemetery board. If you guys want to all give updates on what you're doing. Thank you.
Yep, so I attended, I think it was December 15th. It was really just a symposium of stakeholders and community leaders coming together and talking about, based on scenarios that we know are the scenarios going forward with known science on climate change, in terms of if certain things happen, they offered stories. So this is, if this happens, this is how our environment could change, so on and so forth. And so they started off by sharing those, and then brought everyone together based on their kind of areas. And I thought it was a really great group. It was a really great gathering. And in terms of historic preservation, we touched so many different pieces of it, because we were talking about infrastructure, we were talking about water runoff, or increased storms, more smoke, anything that you can touch in terms of what does it mean to build essentially a resilient community around thinking about longer smoke seasons and so on and so forth. So one of the big takeaways that I noticed in the conversations was the concern going forward that as a resilient community, Missoula has more public infrastructure that people can go to during smoke season. Because we know regardless of what happens, that's going to continue to be an issue. And I'm really interested to think more about how that goes with historic buildings and how it goes with how those come together. So that was definitely something that across the board people were talking about, and I think that we're in a position to play a really important role in that conversation because it has to do with our current built environment. So they're going to continue. I believe there's going to be another meeting down the road, and looking forward to seeing what happens.
Thank you.
So Emmy and I went to a historic house on what street? Spruce, thank you. And had a look at an absolutely fantastic interior. And they have all their original windows and original hardware and an amazing built-in and just really nice people, and they really care about their building. But one of the challenges they're facing, and we're all facing this as we get older, they don't want to climb the ladder to go up there and put up their storm windows, and I totally understand that. And they also they do need 1 or 2 storm windows constructed. They just needed some advice and whatnot, but I'd gotten to thinking about it as maybe as part of our preservation week. Maybe this is something we can help out with. There's enough of us that are hands-on, and we know other people that are hands-on. Maybe we could just do an afternoon where you run around and give people some help and advice at their building. So just a random thought. And I was able just to give the homeowners just a list of resources and whatnot. And I'm sure it's all stuff that we all have, and maybe one of the things we could do, even as part of Preservation Week, if you have common websites or you have a reference something, we should really put all that together and put it on the website. There's certain things that I always look at when people ask me questions, and I just keep a list of the most common tools I buy for our shop. And I forget sometimes that I haven't shared that enough. So it was a pretty good reminder for us to get more of our information out. And it was a lot of fun to see their building.
Thank you. Anything else?
So as a member of the Missoula City Cemetery Board, we are working with Emmy and Laval to put together a RFQ to master plan the cemetery based on a certain qualifications and requirements that we're still working through. So it's a kind of an ongoing process, but it is something in the works. I don't expect it, we're not in a hurry, and there's a lot more people we need to be consulting with along the way, but it is something that we're looking at and trying to update and think about the future of the cemetery as a whole. So that's ongoing.
Okay. Thank you all for talking. Unseen Missoula, the MDA, we're going to be starting up again in April, which is just around the corner, just crazy. But we're currently hiring for the Downtown Heritage Development intern, which will work with the MDA. It's kind of more formalized position to essentially help run the Unseen program. So if you know of anyone who'd be interested in that, the application and job description is on the MDA website. And we just heard yesterday on the September HPC meeting, Alan Newell came and presented about the potential for the downtown heritage plan, and we applied to the Montana Department of Commerce and Tourism grant for that, and we did receive it, which we got nearly $16,000 to create a downtown heritage plan that would go with the downtown master plan. And we've never had that before for downtown Missoula, so that's a pretty big win for us. So that'll go over wayfinding and heritage interpretation signs and maps, creating digital platforms for our downtown heritage, incorporating the tribes, our unseen tours that we have going, and actually formalizing that into a plan, and moving forward from that. And this would also be a great opportunity. We have a small steering committee that's working on this, but I think it'd be awesome to have an HPC representative on that committee. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. We'd love to have one of you there. The Lalonde Ranch I talked about last time, and since then we visited the site. Actually did a site visit on the 21st. Last time I talked about that, they went to the Moon Randolph to kind of understand how City Parks maintains a historic homestead. So this would be kind of emulating that for county parks. And Preserve Historic Missoula is also offered to potentially list the property. I know, Steve, you've worked on that site before. And again, having an HPC rep, Paul's been a little bit involved. Just let me know, and I can let you guys know when the next meeting is if you want to get involved. Yes? Okay, great. Awesome. The bylaws I'm still kind of ticking away at those, but right now they're being reviewed by the city attorney just to make sure that they're up to state code. But after we get that review, then I'll bring them back to you guys before they're actually implemented to have a final read. I talked about the possible neighborhood character overlay, which was instigated by the administration building, the public schools administration building on 6th Street last time. We haven't done anything on that since then. So that was just from the November staff report, but it's still on the list. As Kathy described, we did a couple site visits for 418 East Spruce. The owners are interested in listing. SHPO agrees that it is eligible. And since then, I actually had a UM history student reach out who's looking to formulate an internship for spring semester. And I met with her, and we set up an internship where she'll start working on the base nomination for that and conducting research and working on that. And she's never done a National Register nomination before, but she's interested in historic preservation and what that means. So it could turn into, I think, an interesting project for her, and she'll just be kind of shadowing what we do in historic preservation. And I was hoping to kind of send her to each of you over the next couple months to see what you all do too. She hasn't officially started yet with the city, but she'll be starting in about 2 weeks. So I'll introduce her during our next meeting. As Paul mentioned, the update on the city cemetery. Right now, we're in the process of putting together an RFP, so just starting that process. Design Excellence Project was passed by City Council on the 12th of December, and a staff training was held on the 18th, which is really preliminary, but we will be involved as the HPC for that. For any HP projects that take place within the overlay, we'll then be incorporating the Design Excellence standards within our review, so it'll be design excellence standards as well as Secretary of Interior standards for alterations. We're still kind of smoothing that out as how that's going to look, so it's in the works. But I think eventually I want to get us on a training for that too and what to look out for. So that's coming. And then with the new year, I was just thinking about possible subcommittees and establishing a subcommittee to update our preservation plan and to just think about our long-term goals for historic preservation, for the commission, what we want to work on going into this year, going into the next 5 years. We haven't really talked about that. And that's just something to think about. Maybe next time we can ruminate on that and then create a subcommittee to work on our plan. So.
We have the design charrette coming up too, right, for the downtown?
Yes.
The month here?
Yes, there's a number of things coming up, and they have a stack of cards out right in the hallway, and please come to all those. We need HP representation for that. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? And I will be gone too, since I'm afraid of that.
Good to know.
So I guess we can still have a meeting, but Paul and I won't be here, I guess.
Okay. So we can discuss maybe rearranging our next meeting. Okay, that's good to know. Which we can do with our bylaws. That's okay to do.
And then I should mention on the 18th of this month at 2 o'clock at the Myrna Loy in Helena is the State Historic Preservation Awards. So, and there's, and I can't remember, I got it today and I can't remember the four project, or the four, yeah. There's 2 projects and 3 people being awarded. And I'm sorry, I've just completely forgot who they all are. But anyway, Christy Hager I know is one. Marie O'Neill from MSU School of Architecture.
I have the email. I can send it to
we'll
you
get
guys.
out there, but
Yeah.
anyway, if you're
Yeah.
interested, the awards are that day on the 18th, which is a Thursday, in the Capitol, or excuse me, Myrna Loy. But it's also the time to go to the Capitol and lobby your senators and representatives. So anyway.
So here's the award recipients.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Marie O'Neill Conrad, Outstanding Service to Historic Preservation. Randy Hafer, Outstanding Contributions to Historic Preservation. Christy Hager, Outstanding Achievement. And then the McGraw Building in Fort Benton got the Outstanding Historic Preservation Rehabilitation Project. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service got the Outstanding Historic Preservation Stewardship. And then I believe the Forest Service got something on nominations. Oh, it's a list of everything that's nominated.
They also give certificates for all National Register nominations for the past 2 years. So that's probably what it is.
Yeah, the Forest Service did a group nomination of 5, actually it's actually 6 lookouts.
Yeah. Great. Okay. All right. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.